Welcome back to your number one source for cozy gaming and design content. Today we're going to take a little look at the CMF Watch Pro, and I'm going to try to explain why I think it's better than the Apple Watch. Okay, I'll admit, that's a bit hyperbolic. Obviously, a $100 always tethered smartwatch is nowhere near being in the same league as the veritable quantum computer that is the Apple Watch and other more expensive smartwatches. So yes, you're right. You can put away your pitchforks now. The CMF Watch Pro is not objectively better than the Apple Watch. However, to me, it is. And we'll get into why exactly that is throughout this video, but right now I'm going to give you a bit of background on what I'm looking for in a smartwatch and a little bit about the company that makes this. To start off with, I generally kind of don't really like or fully understand watches in general. I've never really worn them, and I always found them to be a bit redundant given that I very much grew up at a time when there was either a clock on the wall or you had a phone or some other device in your pocket that could tell you the time anywhere in the world. So I never really understood watches outside of something like a calculator watch. That was a little bit sneakier than pulling your phone out and using a calculator on that. But I recently have started to understand them more as an accessory, which, has its uses and can, in a pinch, still be helpful. But mostly it's there for fashion value. And smartwatches, I think, are a great example of this. My attitude towards smartwatches in general mirrors my attitude towards traditional watches. I don't entirely see the point. As a vehement defender of small smartphones, sure, I think the functionality of a smartphone on your wrist in the form factor of a watch is a great idea, and I would love to not have to carry around a big old phone and just use my watch for everything. That would be great. However, the way that development is going in the smartwatch space is more in the direction of accessory. As they exist now, I really don't understand smartwatches. Not only do they not serve the same function as a smartphone, they need to be charged every night, or once a week at best. Add to that the lack of personality that these products have, and the fact that I would argue 90% of people don't actually need to monitor their vital functions 24/7, and these are really just fashion accessories. Personally, I think the ultimate smartwatch, the perfect design, would be something that's truly unique, not just absurd for the sake of being unique, but actually unique, and would only serve one or two main functions: receive and reply to text and phone calls, and tell the time, and maybe weather if you're feeling fancy. This watch could come in right around $150, $200, or less, of course, which I think for the functionality is fairly reasonable. Okay, so now we have an idea of what my idea of an ideal smartwatch would be. But obviously that's never going to be made because, let's be real, that wouldn't really sell enough to cover the costs of actually making it. I'm saying all this to give you context for what I'm looking for when I look at a smartwatch. And I want you to keep this context in mind when we take a look at this watch from Okay, so a really quick and dirty rundown of Nothing as a brand. Nothing was announced by Carl Pei in 2020, after having quit OnePlus, a smartphone company he founded, but ultimately got a little bit out of his hands. Carl wanted to try again, this time making sure that the design and user experience was the number one focus. The company's About Us page tells us that Nothing is not really interested in silly names or technical speak, but instead in artistry, passion, and trust. Their aim being to create a seamless connection between the user and their technology. As part of this, they claim they are intending to be a carbon neutral company. Now, I'm not here to determine their true intent or tell you whether or not they're an ethical company, but they have apparently been able to make at least their first product carbon neutral through the use of carbon credits, which are, fine, I guess. But also, offsetting the electricity used in the manufacturing process, whatever that means. Regardless of their perhaps dubious sustainability claims, Nothing and their budget sub-brand CMF stand out in the smart things space when it comes to their industrial design. Well, Nothing more than CMF, but more on that in a bit. Now yes, it is fairly simple to just reduce Nothing's design methodology to make it clear and maybe add a little bit of red. But the fact that no one else in the smart things world seems to want to take this clearly profitable approach shows how out there their designers are thinking. While I can't argue with the take that clear housings and flashy lights are really more of a gimmick than an actual feature, I do think there is value to a company taking the more artistic approach to design. Sure, these features may not serve an actual productivity function, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth doing. And this attitude shows, at least to me, just how much Nothing understands design as art. And that makes sense, given that they have partnered with Teenage Engineering for their industrial design. Nothing seems very much hellbent on the idea of making their products beautiful and unique. And while this certainly mirrors the marketing of Apple, I do think that they show it more than Apple ever really has, at least in recent memory. Where Apple takes the tried and true kind of premium product approach of solid, shiny, sometimes matte metal, simple, clean, minimal design, which has worked well for them this far, I think what Nothing's doing is way more interesting, and, at least in today's design world, more important. I mentioned that CMF isn't quite as daring and out there as Nothing, and practically that's because of the lower price point. Creating clear products actually takes an incredible amount of quality control and manufacturing know-how, and definitely isn't a cheap endeavor. So, breaking from this approach, I think was a smart move for CMF. What is impressive though is just how recognizably Nothing CMF's products are. You can clearly tell that they go with Nothing's design language and goals. And that isn't easy to do when you basically dropped arguably your most distinguishing design feature. But enough about the companies. You're here for the watch. Now, this isn't a review or a deep dive. It's simply my take on the CMF watch, and what I think about it from a design standpoint. So, with that in mind, let's talk about From what I understand, the functionality is really quite similar to a lot of other ultra-budget smartwatches on the market. So, I think where this really stands out is in its industrial design. It's very light, but not so much so that it feels like a 10-cent plastic watch you'd pick up at the dollar store. The construction feels solid and sturdy, and the namesake for the company, color, material, and finish are all far and away above their competitors. I think, as I am wont to do, that there could have been more ornament added to the actual industrial design of this watch. Nothing and CMF both have a very much analog UX/UI styling, with their main distinguishing feature being their dot matrix style font and their interesting mix of retro and modern color palette. And in their Nothing branded products, this makes its way into the hardware as well. However, this seems to have been lost in the search for a cheaper entry point. Ultimately, I understand where this constraint may have come from though. I do think the addition of an actual crown instead of a button, or maybe just more than one button, could have served to bring this product more in line with the analog UX/UI styling that's included. I think that the simple, Apple-like design is definitely to the watch's benefit from a marketing standpoint, however. While it may not necessarily be to my personal tastes, for what people are looking for on the market of smartwatches, I do think it helps the CMF watch really reach a broader audience. I don't think it would have been quite as likely to reach mainstream appeal if it didn't kind of copy Apple in their very simple style. Their minimal, kind of premium looking material choices and design styles. And part of this may just be because this is Nothing's budget brand, and they're likely saving the really innovative and interesting industrial designs for their flagship brand, Nothing. So the overall hardware design I found to be very solid, and there really isn't much to complain about. My personal preference definitely falls in line with the flat sides, face, and chamfers present on this watch, and I always love to see people using standards like the 22mm clips for this watch's band. This allows the user to have a great deal more customization when it comes to how the watch actually looks on your wrists. I'm just wearing the stock silicone ones because I didn't really want to go out and buy a extra strap. I don't love silicone bands. They feel weird, they feel sweaty. I don't love them, but this has been what I've been using while I've been wearing this watch. And I don't hate it, I don't love it, but it's not offensive. Though this watch performs very well when it comes to the industrial design, it does fall a bit flat in the while I'm very much able to understand and give CMF a pass when it comes to the lack of super premium features like high refresh rate screen or standalone functionality for things like text messaging, calls, and responding to notifications, I do still think there's room for improvement within the restrictions of a low-powered and low-budget device. The biggest, for me personally, would be the ability to edit which functions appear when scrolling through the pages on the watch. I personally don't care even a little bit about the health features like heart rate, steps, or sleep tracking, and I would really love to just remove these pages from the watch entirely so that I don't have to scroll 3 times just to check the weather. I don't think this would be too difficult to implement, though I'm certainly no programmer, and so it may be more complicated than I assume. But I think they could probably figure it out if they wanted to. Even just the ability to change which page everything appears on would be nice. If they feel really strongly about it for some reason, sure, leave them there, but let me change where each one goes so I can prioritize for myself. After all, the mission statement is to simplify the tech and make interactions seamless. And this, in my opinion, does the opposite. This lack of customization rears its head in the watch faces as well. They did make the immensely good decision to allow you to create custom watch faces, but at least in this version of the OS, you can only save one face. And even with this tool at your fingertips, you have a very limited ability to actually customize what information is on the screen. What makes matters worse, I think, is the fact that you do this on your phone and simply upload it to your watch. There's no reason, as far as I can tell, that you couldn't make the customization much more in-depth with the computational power afforded to you by an Android or iOS device. Now, lest you think it's all bad, it's not. I think the customization is clearly a weak point for this watch, but definitely not a deal breaker. The amount of watch faces made available to you for free on the app is frankly plenty for most people, and giving you the option to put your favorite image as the background is really all most people will care to do anyway. So I don't think these would be reasons not to buy the watch, just points of improvement if CMF wanted to make their user experience better. While the watch falls a bit flat for me in customization and interactivity, it definitely gains points when it comes to the overall. What I really love about this watch is that it isn't obtrusive. It doesn't stick out on your wrist and serve as a status symbol. Personally, I like my watches to kind of blend into the background of my overall outfit, which, while a smartwatch will pretty much always stick out and bring a little bit of an air of modernity to an outfit, I think that the fact that this watch is really quite easy to miss helps a lot in this regard. In case you couldn't tell, I'm pretty into the more vintage styling when it comes to my clothes, and that extends to accessories as well. As much as I love the ability to get notifications and calls on my wrist, I don't think the modern minimal style really suits me. Though this isn't anything against the watch. It does what it's attempting very well. It looks and feels like a smartwatch. and some may even say an Apple Watch, from afar. And given that I think what most people are looking for is exactly that minimal and simplistic design, this watch works perfectly. And that follows in the UX as well. It has a very simple color palette of black, white, dark gray, and an accent of orange, which screams nothing and gives you access to pretty much all the functions offered right up front. All you need to do is swipe left or right, and after a few seconds, you'll find what you're looking for in an easy-to-read graph, or just written out in Nothing's very pleasing retro-ish style font. I think the simplicity offered by this watch is definitely necessitated by the fact that it physically can't do much else other than the few functions offered. This is essentially a Bluetooth notification receptacle with a heart rate and blood oxygen monitor strapped to it, but that's kind of exactly what I'm looking for in a smartwatch, minus the last two features. As I talked about at the start of this video, unless my smartwatch is going to be replacing my phone entirely, I really don't want it to do much else other than tell me the time, look great, and show me and let me interact with my notifications. And this watch actually accomplishes that pretty damn well. Much better, I would say, than the Apple Watch, with its much more high-powered and feature-packed offerings. Speaking of comparisons to the Apple Watch, there is one huge one that I want to talk about, and that is if I can praise one thing about Apple, other than their innovative designs in the early 2000s, it's the way that they were able to create such a perfect ecosystem between their products that no one wants to leave the walled garden. That walled garden, I think, is a short-sighted and highly profit-motivated way of conducting business. And Nothing is attempting to take that same approach. Since it began, Nothing's mission statement has been, imagine a world where all your devices are seamlessly connected. Tech that just works, that you don't have to think about, that feels like nothing. Sound familiar? Well, it should. It's basically exactly how Apple sells themselves. The "it just works" slogan is key here. In order to be able to deliver on that promise, you need to control everything. Nothing will just work if even one link in the chain is owned by somebody else using different standards, a different language, and a different platform. Even from a design standpoint, this is true. Sure, one thing can be made from steel and another thing from ABS, and they can communicate together perfectly from a technical standpoint. But if the design language isn't consistent throughout all the products that you offer, then you're just offering different products and not a lifestyle, which is what Apple, and now Nothing, are attempting to sell. This attempt at control isn't necessarily bad, though I have a hard time thinking of a world where this is a good thing. I don't need to tell you how bad one company being the sole provider of every tech product would be. The opportunity for abuse is unavoidable. And I don't have too much of a point with this segment, other than just a word of caution to those of you who are fans of Nothing. They're a company, and they will screw you if they think it'll make them a buck. However, I think it's potentially a positive sign that they opted to use Android, an ostensibly open source OS. Now, this obviously probably had a lot to do with the fact that they couldn't afford to make an entirely new OS just for the people who use it to reject it, like they do pretty much every alternate OS that has attempted to enter the smartphone space. And it wouldn't shock me at all if they announced they were releasing Nothing OS at some point in the future. But as far as the information we have available to us today, Nothing does seem to be doing this in a more consumer-friendly way than Apple. But only time will tell. Okay, bringing it back to this watch. Ultimately, I think there's a lot that's great about it. The price point in particular is a huge plus. The design is unique in its vertical, and I think the level of customizability is, while certainly lacking, ultimately good enough. I think this, and all of Nothing's other products, are really more interesting and important for their approach to design. Their focus on making a beautiful and delightful product is something I want to see more of in the industrial design space, at least from companies normal people know and can afford. I think it would be amazing to see simple home goods get this level of attention and care again. Can you imagine if we had, kettles and calculators made by designers that really care about what they're making? It would be incredible to get back that energy in the cheaper, more common goods, and not just one-off specialty products. With the advancements we've made in mass manufacturing, I think there is a real chance we could bring back the soul to product design in normal people's everyday lives. But what do you think? Does this watch interest you? What do you think about Nothing's design goals and approach? Either way, thank you so much for watching. I know you didn't have to. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a great day, and happy gaming.